What are the facts that we all need to consider? This West Valley Fault has moved 4 times in the past 1,400 years, and the interval of movement is roughly between 400 years or 600 years. But the fault does not move in exact interval. Let us say that we consider the interval of 400 years as the reckoning period. The next question that you would want to ask is, when was the last movement of the Valley Fault system? We think that the last movement of the Valley Fault system occurred in 1658, 355 years ago. Compare that to the interval of 400 years, which might be plus or minus tens or hundreds of years. What is the more prudent thing to do? Is to know what will be the effects of the movement of the West Valley Fault, and more importantly, we need to prepare for this. So, what are the effects of a strong earthquake from the West Valley Fault? Prior to giving you the details of the effects, let me just say that there are many problems or hazards related to earthquake events. The first is the fault rupture. If the fault would move in a large magnitude way, then the ground can be ruptured. We don't allow building on top of it. Second, and most importantly, even 50 to 100 kilometers away from the fault movement, there will be a strong ground shaking. So ground shaking can cause collapse of buildings. Third, if the ground is soft, if the ground is made up of sand with shallow water table, there can be liquefaction. This sand layer behaves like a liquid, so buildings can subside, fissures will be seen in roads. During an earthquake, in steep slope areas, if the shaking is severe, landslides will happen. It does not only happen during election, landslides happen during an earthquake event. If there is a strong earthquake, also a secondary hazard will be the fire caused by the collapse of like candles on flammable materials, or even short circuits of electrical wires. So we have to worry about fire. If, on the other hand, the earthquake is offshore, there can be a tsunami as well. I would like to focus on the ground shaking impact of an earthquake from the West Valley Fault, but the rest of the maps for all of these hazards minus fire are shown at the back. The real problem in disaster preparedness is we are not able to imagine the consequence of a natural hazard. We need to really know who will be affected, how many will be affected, which buildings will be affected, how many buildings will be affected, so that we will know the real problem, and if we know the real problem, we will know the appropriate solution. So aside from hazard assessment, we conducted risk assessment, and in risk assessment, there are 3 major parameters that we need to know. First is the extent and intensity of the hazard. For example, the earthquake, what is the magnitude and the ground shaking that it will cause in many parts of Metro Manila and vicinity. Second would be the exposure. Who are the communities? What buildings are there? What type of buildings are there? How old are these? So we need to know whether these buildings are present in the hazard area and whether these buildings can withstand a strong or severe shaking. The third would be the people inside and the building itself. Are they vulnerable? Are they strong enough? Are the people capacitated to properly respond to a strong event? So hazard, exposure, and vulnerability are very important in the risk assessment, and we all gathered this to really share with you now the final results of the analysis. The project was divided into multi-components. First is the production of a high-resolution digital elevation model, or LiDAR, with the lead agency as NAMRIA. The exposure information, knowing what buildings, who are there, or how many people are there. Exposure information led by FIVOX. The flood is taken care of PAGASA, and the severe wind by PAGASA as well. They will share with you the results later. But the earthquake risk modeling is led by FIVOX, and this workshop and seminar is led by Office of Civil Defense. So the first, through the Government of Australia, through AusAid, a LiDAR dataset was acquired in April for the whole Metro Manila and surrounding towns that we are interested in. And these are used not only to know the elevation of the ground, but to determine where these buildings are and help in finding out the different attributes of the building. But getting the information above the ground is not enough. We have to go down. So we have to establish exposure databases to the greater Metro Manila. What are the exposure databases? This can be the physical location of buildings, the size, shape of the different administrative areas, the construction period of the building, the demographic or social characteristics, the economic characteristics, and structural characteristics. We wanted to know this so that we can use this to determine the impacts, the different hazards like severe wind, flood, and earthquake.